Hello Year 10, this is the fourth lesson in your booklet B1.4, the circulatory system in humans. You'll need your booklet and you need to turn to page 13 for me please in the booklet. The lesson objectives for today are learning to be able to identify the exact route the blood takes through the double circulatory system. So being able to name and label all of the blood vessels and the chambers and the valves and whether that blood is oxygenated or deoxygenated. On page 13 then, turn your page sideways so that you can see this diagram. Now the diagram in your booklet I'm afraid is a bit dark in the photocopy, but you should be able to see on the screen in front of you a colour version. We say that our circulatory system is called a double circulatory system, and the reason why is it's got two routes. It's basically a double pump, okay? Whenever we are describing the circulatory system and the heart, remember we always describe the left side of the heart as if it's in our body. So this is the left and this is the right side of the heart, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to finish off the sentences in the boxes 1 all the way through to 6 to add a bit more detail about the names of the blood vessels and the chambers that the blood passes through on its journey. So I want you first of all to have a go yourself, pause the video and see if you can describe the names of the blood vessels and the chambers as you go round on this journey. And then I will go over it. So, if we start at number 1, the deoxygenated blood, and I'm going to swap my pen to a blue pen at this point just to make it a bit clearer, is going to arrive at the heart from the body. So we are basically arriving, okay, here, at this point here. This is what we call the vena cava. It's coming from the head, the superior vena cava, but also it's coming from the lower part of the body, the inferior vena cava, okay? So deoxygenated blood, we're going to do in blue, arrives at the heart from the body on the right hand side via the vena cava. So via means by, through that, yeah, via the vena cava. It goes into the right atrium. If you want to be really fancy, you can say through the tricuspid valve, into the right ventricle, and is going to leave the right side of the heart by the pulmonary artery. Anything with the word pulmonary in front of it is to do with the lungs, and arteries always go away from the heart. So can you see here, this is our pulmonary artery going to our left lung, and it's tucked behind there, but it would be going to our right lung here. And this blood is still at this point deoxygenated. So I'm now going to swap to red, because at number 2, that was number 1, number 2, this blood is entering the lungs and it's going to pick up oxygen, picks up oxygen. We now say it's called oxygenated blood. And that's why we're doing it in red, okay? This oxygenated blood is going to be picked up, okay, at the alveoli. So we've studied the alveoli in the lungs and respiration booklet. And it also drops off the carbon dioxide, CO2. So now this blood is oxygenated. Can you see it's coming in here on this side? It's quite tiny, this diagram, but it's going to be coming from the right lungs and it's going to be coming from the left lungs into the left side of the heart. So at number 3, oxygenated blood from the lungs arrives at the heart on the left side through the name of the blood vessel, the pulmonary vein. Remember, pulmonary, anything to do with the lungs, so it's come from the lungs. Vein, because it's coming into the heart. It's going to come into the left atrium. If you want to include the name of the valve, the bicuspid valve, it flows through into the left ventricle and out of the heart. It's squeezed out of the heart by the big main aorta. So hopefully you can see it. There's the atrium through the valve, there's the ventricle, and it's going to go out through the top of this. If I switch to black, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So it's going to go out to the head and down to the body behind the back of the heart, okay? Now, this blood is obviously all oxygenated and it's been squeezed with a real big force because we've got a thick wall on the left side of the heart. So the oxygenated blood is transported around the body in arteries to withstand the very high pressure that it's travelling in, to the body organs, and particularly to the cells in the body organs, so that the cells can carry out respiration. Remember, respiration requires oxygen and glucose to release energy. Not to make it, to release energy, okay? So that the cells can carry out their job. So if it drops off the oxygen, it's going to be picking the carbon dioxide back up again. So this actually happens in narrow capillaries. Can you see where the oxygenated blood is coming down to the body, okay, and up to the head here? Now the blood vessels start to get thinner, and this is because they're becoming capillaries, narrow capillaries, where literally only one red blood cell can travel through at a time. So at this place is where the oxygen is dropped off along with the glucose to release energy by respiration. And obviously the carbon dioxide is picked up as well. So we're now going to swap back to blue because my blood now is deoxygenated and it's going to come back to the heart from the head and upper body and from the lower body, okay, via the veins. So veins always bring it back, and these veins will have valves in them, leading to the vena cava on the right side of the heart to come back to its second pump. So left side pumping to the head and body, right side pumping just to the lungs, okay? Pause the video. I'm sure you can make a much neater job than I have done there, scribbling all over it, and make sure that you've got those labels added correctly with the correct names of the blood vessels and the names of the chambers. So, page 14. This is very, very similar to what we've just done, but it's just a different style of answering the same kinds of questions. So in this task, this is extended prose text, and it's got some missing words. The missing words are down here, okay? So we're going to add these missing words to this text. So I want you to tick them off as you use them. Pause the video, have a go yourself, and I will go over it then. Thank you. So, the path the blood takes through the heart. First of all, deoxygenated blood, blood with very little oxygen, and I'm doing it in blue so that you can see, returns to the heart via the superior vena cava, which is the one that comes from the head, think superior higher up, and inferior vena cava, inferior means lower down, so from the legs and lower body, entering the right atrium. From the right atrium, the blood flows through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. And all this time, this blood is deoxygenated. The right ventricle then pumps blood into the pulmonary artery, and this is going to carry our deoxygenated blood to the lungs, okay? So at this point in the lungs, in the alveoli, we're going to get gas exchange. Oxygen is going to go into the blood and carbon dioxide is coming out of the blood so the person can breathe it back out again. So at the lungs, the blood's oxygen supply is replenished. Replenished means it's just built back up again. The blood is now referred to as oxygenated. Oxygenated blood flows back to the heart via the pulmonary veins, entering the left atrium. From the left atrium, the blood flows through a bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. And the left ventricle then pumps blood into that big main artery called the aorta, and this is going to carry the oxygenated blood to the rest of the head and the body to deliver that oxygen to where it's required for respiration and to pick up the carbon dioxide. Now, turn over to page 15. At this point, I would normally take you on the school network to a piece of software that we use, multimedia software, okay, to navigate your way around the heart. And this is normally animated, you can see it beating, but I can't access it on the laptop here whilst I'm describing it, okay? So in your own words, I want you to write me 2 short paragraphs, and I mean very short paragraphs, literally only a sentence long, okay? One paragraph is going to tell me what the function or job of the left side of the heart is, and the other paragraph is going to tell me the function job of the right side of the heart is, okay? I'm going to swap to black pen and just explain this. So on the animation, normally we can see this heart squeezing. So we get the atria squeezed together first, then the ventricle squeeze, and you can see the blood actually flowing around the heart, and you can see the heartbeat on the little monitor up here, and you can speed the heart up and you can slow it down. But obviously it won't work in this PowerPoint. So if we're taking this blood vessel that comes from the lungs here, and it's coming into the heart, this is what we call the pulmonary vein. Remember, it's come from the lungs, it's got lots of oxygen, and it's coming into the heart. So veins come in, arteries go out. It goes into this top chamber, which we call the left atrium, LA, I've labelled there, through a valve, which is the bicuspid valve, and we can see the heart strings attached there, into the lower chamber, the left atrium. So as the atria squeeze, the valve opens, this valve opens, that one closes, and blood flows down into the left ventricle. As the left ventricle, LV, as the left ventricle squeezes here, this valve closes to prevent blood flowing backwards, and this valve opens and the blood will flow out through this main artery, which is our aorta, and it's going to go off to the head and body to deliver the oxygen to where it's needed for respiration. So then the return journey, the deoxygenated blood, can you see it's more like a dark purpley red rather than the bright red of the oxygenated blood. This is going to come back into our heart through our vena cava on the right side. It's going to go into our right atrium, which squeezes, opens this valve, which is the tricuspid valve, down into the right ventricle. The blood is going to get squeezed out through this valve whilst this one shuts, this one opens, and blood is going to leave the heart through the pulmonary artery to go back to the lungs to go and pick up oxygen. So our left side's job is basically what we call, the systemic circulatory system, because it's basically taking oxygenated blood and it's going to deliver it to all the systems. So I haven't written in full sentences here, but I want you to. I've just put it briefly because I haven't got much space. So it's the systemic circulatory system. and it's going to deliver oxygenated blood to the body systems. In other words, all the organs, okay? Whereas your right side is what we call the pulmonary system, circulatory system, and that is going to take your deoxygenated blood and it's going to take it to the lungs so that it can collect more oxygen, pick up more oxygen. Okay, so pause the video. Page 15, I just want 2 really short paragraphs describing to me the function, the job of the left side and the job of the right side, the 2 different pumps. So remember, we've got a left pump and a right pump. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, at this point in the lesson, this is a retrieval practice task, really to check your understanding, okay, of being able to label and identify the different chambers, the blood vessels and the valves, okay. This is probably the hardest diagram, okay, I could find, okay, to label. Not all hearts are nice and neat, okay, in terms of them easily being able to see the left and the right side. So in this heart, it looks so complicated because we've got blood vessels crossing over one another. But if you always follow with your finger, if you trace with your finger on a diagram, you should be able to find the route that the heart the blood travels through the heart. So we're going to colour in, first of all, our systemic system in red. So remember, that's our oxygenated in red. And we're going to take a blue to do our pulmonary system, okay, which is our deoxygenated blood, okay. Remember, systemic carry blood away from the heart to the rest of the body, and pulmonary carry the blood from the heart to the lungs and back. So I'm going to start with my red because I'm going to start on the left hand side. Blood has now picked up oxygen, it's come from the lungs, and these 2 blood vessels coming in here are the pulmonary veins coming from the left lung and the right lung, okay. They're coming into this top chamber, which is the left atrium. They're going to pass through this valve. We're going to miss this label a second because it's not to do with the oxygenated blood. This is our bicuspid valve. And it's going to go into this lower chamber, which is the left ventricle. So I've helped you with the start. Let's see if you can finish the rest of it off. So pause the video. So we're now going to take our blood out of the heart. So if I draw the label lines in so you can see the route of the oxygenated blood, can you see the blood is going out of the heart here, up the top to the head, to the body. It would actually be coming behind the heart there via the aorta. The aorta is going to deliver that oxygenated blood to all the body systems, to the organs. So once the organs have had the oxygen, the blood is now deoxygenated. It's going to come in on the right side of the heart here, and there are actually 2 blood vessels. One is called the superior vena cava because it's come from the head, from the top. They haven't actually put a label line here, but if you want to add it on, this is the inferior vena cava. Coming in on this side, okay, and we can also see the vena cava coming in here. When the blood comes into the top chamber, this is our right atrium. It's going to go through a set of valves here. This is our tricuspid valves because it's attached at 3 points by the heartstrings, the tendons. It's going to go into this lower chamber down here. This is our right ventricle, and I'm purposely missing out this label in the middle because it's to do with the middle of the heart, which I'll come back to. It gets pumped out of the heart, and you should be able to see it's actually going to the left on here and the right here. This is the semilunar valve here. that the blood passes through, and it leaves the heart by the pulmonary artery. Remember, arteries go away from the heart, pulmonary off to the lungs because it's got to pick up oxygen. So what is this missing label in the middle? The middle part of the heart is called the septum. So this is out of 12 labels. If you got 10 or more, you are doing extremely well if you were able to label 10 or more of those labels. So we're coming to the second to last task in the booklet for today's lesson. We're going to start with the task where I'm going to give you some assistance, and then the second part of the task you're going to produce some independent writing for me, a little bit like the work you did in Year 8, the journey of the red blood cell around the body, okay? So you're going to write a complete journey through the circulatory system, mentioning all the parts of the heart, the chambers, the blood vessels, the valves, and whether the blood is oxygenated or deoxygenated. So just a quick summary. I'm going to help you write that by filling in, we're going to fill in the table together. So we've got on this side, if I coloured that in red, this is our oxygenated blood. It's come from the lungs into our heart, and it's going to leave the heart, okay, to deliver oxygenated blood to the head and the body. So these two blood vessels, this one coming in, which is our pulmonary vein, and this one coming out, okay, is our aorta. We've got the arrows on there. That carries only oxygenated blood. Whereas on the right-hand side, we've got our deoxygenated blood is going to come into the heart, where it's dropped off the oxygen to the body cells by the vena cava, and it's going to pump that deoxygenated blood up to the lungs, okay, by the pulmonary artery to go and pick up more oxygen. And so clearly we can see our right pump pumping to the lungs and our left pump pumping to our body systems, to our head. So this is what we call the systemic, and this in blue on the right hand side is the pulmonary systems, okay, the two separate pumps. So you've got a table that looks like this. We've got 3 of the parts of the circulatory system have already been identified: the pulmonary artery, the aorta, and the right ventricle. So we're going to write either in blue or red, depending on whether they're oxygenated or deoxygenated, the parts in here to help you. And you're going to fill in the pathway, and these 2 columns will help you when you're writing your complete journey. So if we're starting in the pulmonary artery, if we go back, remember our pulmonary artery is carrying deoxygenated blood. It's got very little oxygen. So it actually tells you up here, from the pulmonary artery going away from the heart, going to the lungs. It's going to go to the lungs. But at the lungs, it's going to start to pick up oxygen. So this is where I'm going to swap to red, okay? So lungs, we'll write twice, blue as it comes in, red as it leaves. From the lungs, it's going to leave the lungs and it's going to come into the heart by the pulmonary vein. From the pulmonary vein, it's going to go to the left atrium, the left ventricle, and then it's going to leave the heart through the aorta. The aorta is going to take this oxygenated blood to the head and body. And this is where it's going to drop off the oxygen. So we're going to switch back to our blue as well. Head and body is going to bring deoxygenated blood back to the heart. It's going to come back to the heart by the vena cava. It's going to come into the right side of the heart, into the right atrium, and into the right ventricle, and then the whole thing would start again, okay, up to the pulmonary artery. So this is, if you like, our flow diagram telling us our correct sequence, okay, of the blood as it passes through the heart, starting in the pulmonary artery and finishing in the right ventricle. And all we've got to do is add in the detail on this side that will help us write our journey on the opposite page, okay? So pause the video, see if you can write the pathways, and then I will go over the answers with you. Okay, so if we start at the top, the pulmonary artery takes deoxygenated blood out of the heart on the right-hand side. So this is where we're getting the detail coming in. It's travelling to the lungs to pick up, and this is where I'm going to swap to my red, oxygen and become oxygenated blood. Is going to travel back to the left side of the heart into the pulmonary vein. From the pulmonary vein, it's going to get squeezed into the left atrium, the bicuspid valve opens and blood then enters the left ventricle. This squeezes, double E, blood through the semilunar valves. So I'm going to have to write this at the side here because my writing's too big. Semilunar valves into the aorta. So this is a really, really powerful, high-pressured artery that leaves the heart. This is taking out oxygenated blood away from the left side of the heart to deliver oxygen to the head and body. And I'm going to swap to the blue and pick up CO2. So now our blood is deoxygenated. In other words, it's got very little oxygen. It's going to travel back to the heart, to the right side of the heart, into the vena cava. If you want to mention about the superior and inferior, that's absolutely perfect, okay? When it gets into the vena cava, it's going to get squeezed, double E, into the right atrium, through the tricuspid valves, into the right ventricle. And it's at this point that the right ventricle will squeeze and pump blood out of the heart to the pulmonary artery. And we go all the way back to the beginning again. So pause the video, make sure your table is filled in, and then on the opposite page, this is your last task to do, page 18. I want you to use this kind of format to write extended prose. Don't forget capital letters and your full stops, okay? Like a QWC response. This would be considered your rough draft in your booklet. And then I'm going to ask you, okay, to then submit that as an assignment, okay, so that I can give it a mark out of 6 so we can see how you've done on being able to identify the different parts of the heart in the correct sequence. Thank you very much, Year 10.